Hello, and welcome to another author discussion with one of the amazing authors of The Other Side of Divorce, Breakups That Lead to Breakthroughs. And I have to share my understanding of this amazing woman. Ann Hughes is just a fantastic person. Sometimes you only get to meet people online, you never see them in person. That's not the case. I actually got to talk to Ann in person and attend a conference with her. So that was fantastic. She has really focused her professional skills on helping families with children with different needs and abilities to go through the divorce process with a real focus on what is best for those kiddos who may need additional support during the divorce and may need additional considerations for helping the kids beyond 18, which is where most co-parenting plans are going to end. So I am so excited to be able to just sit back and listen to Mary Ann and have her share her wisdom. So Mary Ann, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marty. It was a pleasure to meet you in person. It's definitely ongoing pleasure to keep working with you and have these collaborations and projects with you.
It's amazing. I was saying this the other day. It's amazing how such a diverse group of people can get together and have such similar stories. I mean, we have literally international representation in that book, and it's always amazing. So, Mary Ann, let me pop off the screen here, and I'm going to let you share your wisdom and expertise. And then after you finish, we're going to have a few questions and time to just sit and chat together.
Yes, so I'm Mary Ann Pano Hughes as my author name, but normally I go by Mary Ann Hughes. And so this book that I've worked on, and Marty kindly invited me to write one of the chapters. I'm so honored that she did, and it was such a learning and growth experience for me to actually be in a published book and go through the process. And now I come at things differently, I guess, as part of my journey, writing a book and through my journey that led me to the book. And also thinking about this yesterday about what my journey is going forward. And so for years, I identified myself as a special needs mom, a stay-at-home mom. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, taking care of my kids with different abilities on different ends of the autism spectrum. And so over time, I kind of forgot what it was like to have other interests because my focus was taking care of my kids. And at the time, my marriage and having everything work is, from dealing with the schools to trying to manage a household and taking care of both of my kids' diverse needs. And so before marriage, I had an MBA, I had worked in Fortune 500 companies and was very passionate and driven in what I did. And so along the way, and not that I regret any moment of my life, but I kind of lost sight of those things that I had done and what I might do in the future. And so the name of the book is very apropos, The Other Side of Divorce, Breakups That Lead to Breakthroughs, because it did lead to breakthroughs for me to go through divorce. Not something that I ever wanted or expected or saw coming or didn't know how I would recover from that, but I did. It was something that happened to me, and I took that opportunity that presented itself to me to figure out what I wanted to do for my kids and how I was going to navigate this and carry myself through the process. So I'm really proud of the way I came through it. Granted, there were some very difficult parts emotionally and trying to figure things out for me and my kids, but I ended up getting a very good result for my family, and it was a growth opportunity for me to learn what I could do. And so I took the knowledge that I gained through the process and the inspiration from that to have my new mission in life. In addition to care of my kids, of course, those are always number one, but always to figure out how can I take everything that I learned and this passion that I have and this ability to bring these different resources together, how can I help other people when they're going through similar challenges. I didn't want people to have to recreate the wheel and go through everything I did in terms of the time, money, expense that is part of navigating a divorce, especially one with children with different abilities. And so that's when I created my company, Special Family Transitions. My website actually went live the day my divorce decree was signed. I was kind of working on it in the background because I knew this was something that I felt like I needed to do, was kind of called to do. And even a funny aside, my ex's attorney even made a comment about me maybe using my experience in helping other people or doing something else with it. So it was visible to other people that this was something that would be of value to others going through this process. And so over time, I got all these different certifications, became a certified divorce specialist, and then a certified divorce coach, helped inspire the creation of this certified special needs divorce coach program, which I'm now a part of, and I also now teach so that others can support people in this area who are certified divorce coaches. I've also gone through mediation training, parenting coordination, all these other trainings coming up. I'm going to be a pre-mediation divorce coach. And I even signed up for an NLP training just to kind of expand my skills and ability to help people. And so I share all that because I want people to know that divorce is not the end. It can be a new beginning to what may lay in front of you, but you have to have a vision for your life and what you want to do. And sometimes it's hard to see that, and that you don't have to have that immediately. But my goal was to get through this and focus on my new future as opposed to focus on the past. I had seen many people in the past that I knew personally and had heard stories about that tend to just dwell on the past and not make strides for the future. So, and I didn't want that to be my case. And so I'm a very optimistic person by nature, and I want the best for me and those around me. And so that's the way I approach things. So as a divorce coach, I look at situations, and we don't dwell on the past as divorce coaches. That's kind of more for therapists and other things, but definitely I'll listen to that. But my focus and my goal is to help people look at where they are now and where they want to be, and how can we get there together and make a plan. And so honored to be able to do that with families who have children with special needs or different abilities, so that they can focus on what they need to do to get through their process, work with their attorneys and divorce teams to do what's right, to advocate for their kids and for themselves as part of that divorce. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary Ann. That I love the passion that you bring to this. And I always say, when I hear a coach, and I hope I do this as well, when I hear a coach say, I'm signed up for all these trainings, or at least one training a year, that's something very different than what they've done in the past. I always think that whole lifelong learning thing really is, to me, it's an indicator of somebody that's staying current with what the trends are, because despite what we want to think, trends do change in divorce. Divorce laws change, divorce practices change. So I think that's fantastic that you're doing that.
Yeah, because to me, it's a constantly learning process. So I've been blessed to be able to learn from people like you and different organizations I'm in. I'm in a National Association of Divorce Professionals, which now I'm actually a co-leader for the special needs chapter. But I got to learn, not just from a personal perspective about going divorce, but from a professional perspective. What do we need to look for? What do we need to know? And how can I then help my clients with that information? And so it's a constant learning process. So during divorce, I was kind of learning about divorce, how I can manage it, learning about kind of maybe what led to divorce and how I could, how can I affect change in me and things around me. So as a personal development type of situation, which really, like I said, over the years, maybe hadn't focused on me and working on my skills, but this divorce opportunity created the opportunity for me to have the time or spend the time or to make the time that I felt I needed to do to make the progress and the advances and get what I needed out of this for me and my kids.
Yeah. And as somebody who, like you, went through my own divorce, did not have children, but still went through my own divorce, and then later on became a divorce coach, when I look back, yes, my divorce has similarities to other people's divorces because we're getting a divorce, right? I mean, the outcome is going to be the same in these, but it's very different when you're experiencing it as the person going through it, as opposed to the person who's there to be the coach or the support person or the guide or the attorney or the therapist or the whatever your role is. So yeah, I'm with you. The more I can learn about the different organizations and the different professionals involved in divorce, the better I can serve my clients. And that's one of the reasons I got involved in the National Association of Divorce Professionals. And you may have actually been the person who talked to me about it before I think, and kind of prompted me to join, because that's a really unique organization. And Marianne is one of the co-chairs of the special needs group within that. But it's a group that brings together all divorce professionals. So there's attorneys, there's realtors, there's mortgage lenders, there's coaches, there's therapists, there are, and there's other people, co-parenting coordinators, the whole group of professionals. And we all meet together and share insights from our own perspective, professions. That's a hard. That's sorry, I'm having a problem this morning. So, yeah, I think that's really fantastic. So, Marianne, I did want to talk a little bit about your area of expertise. So, I know that there are not a lot of people that are even aware that there are divorce coaches with specialized training to help people who do have children with, and I'm always unsure what term to use, but with children with special needs or children with different abilities who may need additional support, emotional, physical, mental health, or medication support throughout the divorce process, as well as in their life moving forward. So what do you think are some of the things that a parent with children that has these special considerations, what are some of the worries that they have, and how can a special needs divorce coach be a resource for them?
That's a great question. So I know for me, and for a lot of people I work with and know, is what keeps us up at night is what's going to happen to my child, right? Not just during the divorce, but afterwards, when they're older, when they're an adult and we're no longer here. So these are questions that are so beyond just, like you said, the divorce and creating a parenting plan to when they're 18, because our children, those with special needs and other abilities and challenges, they're not going to miraculously get better when they turn 18. And so we have to look at this as a long-term planning process. How can we combine divorce, even though some people may push back on that, but how can we, in divorce, have the discussions about what's going to happen to our child when they're until they're 18, because a lot of them divorce before then. But even if you're getting divorced after, or even planning, if you're younger and planning for the future, what's going to happen? How are both parents going to contribute, whether it's financially, whether it's emotional support, whether it's caregiving, day-to-day support? How is that going to, what's that going to look like, and who's going to be involved, and what other supports are going to be available to that family? Because it's very expensive, first of all, to care and provide the care and resources and supports and medical needs and therapies and so on for that child. But not just the cost, but it, like I mentioned before, it becomes all consuming. So there's a whole issue about caregiver burnout, because they're so focused and taking care of the child's needs day in, day out. Sometimes it's 24-hour a day care that child needs. Even if it's not physical care, it's so constantly on our mind. We never go to bed and wake up one day and not have to worry about our child. It's something that happens all the time. And that's why people get burnt out. They need help. They need to find out what the resources are. And so I didn't know. And so I had to investigate all that. But there are a lot of resources for help. There are organizations, there are people, there's different professionals who can provide information to help you with that plan and to help you think about things to include in the divorce, to think about what's going to happen after divorce, support you and your kids through the process. Because the way a child, say, for instance, my experience is autism, is how is an autistic child going to understand and process divorce and to deal with the transitions when those things are hard for that kind of disability.
Yeah. And so appreciate this. And it's interesting because I was a behavior consultant in school districts for many, many years up in Canada. And one of the things that I did work with was kids on the spectrum. At that time, we didn't call it the spectrum. There was autistic, there was Asperger's, there was a whole bunch of different titles, but now we just typically call it the autism spectrum, right? So I think one of the things that's really interesting is that if you don't, as a divorcing couple, let's say you've got a 4 or 5 or 6 year old and you're thinking, well, when they get to be 18, 19, or 20, I'll have a better understanding of what they need. So then we can come back and revisit this. In theory, that sounds really nice. But in reality, what happens if the other spouse remarries and moves and doesn't have any understanding of what the child's needs are, what the young adult's needs are at that time? Or maybe they just drop off the face of the earth and refuse to have any future conversation or communication with you. Unfortunately, this happens in any divorce, and or could potentially. So if you don't deal with it right now in the moment, you may never get the chance to deal with it. And that then leaves the, I'm going to say burden, but it's not a burden to care for your kids. That's not what I'm saying, but it is a challenge as a single parent to have to think, okay, I don't have to, my kid's not going to necessarily be able to live on their own. They may be living in a group home, or they may be living with me for a long period of time. So not dealing with it in the divorce can be a big problem.
Well, that's a great point. That's one of the reasons my divorce took so long, is I want to make sure all those questions and what ifs were answered. So I tell people, and the way I approach things is hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that people will stay involved, continue to play support, and be a part of that child's life. But what if they're not? What if something happens? Like you said, what if, we don't know. There's so many what ifs out there. And so we want to have something at least in place where we can have as a backup plan to have additional policies and funds and know where that support is going to come from. Granted, like you said, there may be modifications made. If you haven't thought of those things, or things change in the future, your child's circumstance changes, your circumstance changes, we can always make changes. But it is harder, and it is becomes another legal hurdle
Battle
you may have
sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
more you can think about those now and kind of have those discussions, then hopefully things will go more smoothly in the future.
Right. And I took a training that Marianne was involved in, and I think you were speaking on this, was really even things like letting your family members know, or assuming that in the divorce, let's say you set up a trust fund for your child, but you put it in your child's name, or a family member passes away and leaves a lump sum of money to your child as an inheritance. That can dramatically impact the resources that your child may be able to access in the future. It is, and I remember that. And I remember thinking, I wonder how many people even understand that and know about that stuff when they're going through the divorce, because I've seen people set up trust funds for kids, maybe not realizing what it does.
Right, exactly. And what I learned through my process, and a lot of people probably don't know, and they may learn about it as they're applying for benefits when their child turns 18, is that, yeah, you can't have over $2,000 in that child's name in any form. That then would uh, limit or negate their ability to get, say, Social Security income or other government supports or benefits. So you have to be really careful about how you create your will, how people give money as gifts. So we want to protect the child to not have child money in their name. That includes child support as well as an adult disabled child. So you want to set up what they call first party special needs trust. There's all kinds of fancy names for that, but kind of Medicaid payback supplemental needs trust for child support, because child support then becomes a child's money, and then we don't want that counted against them. And even things like you said, like inheritance and gifts, there's something called a third party special needs trust, and that's for gifts, inheritance, and other funds that also protect the child. So there's different things, and it gets complicated. And that's why we want a team of people who understands it. So you want a family law attorney who understands these different aspects. You want to work with an estate planning attorney who can set up the trust properly so that they will meet, pass muster with different government agencies that may need to look at that. And you want to have all the information reflected properly. So it takes a lot of due diligence and a lot of planning. And that's one of the things I can share is, so people hear all these things and think, oh my gosh, this is going to be so expensive. But where I come in is I help people kind of give them a heads up. These are things you need to think about and consider so that later they're not losing or having to pay back the government or not able to get funds for their child because they didn't know about these things going into this process.
Right. And I just want to throw out there, because there may be people, I mean, this is YouTube. There could be people from all over the world listening to this, and I hope there are. But I do want to, we're talking specifically for the United States here because we are actually both located in Texas. So I just want to make that clear. I'm from Canada. I know Canada has different qualifications and things. And I know different countries have different requirements around this. So, but the premise is still true, whether we're using the same agency names or not, as whatever may be relevant in your company and your country. Just make sure that you are checking with somebody that knows. And because what seems to make sense in our heads is not always what is legally or financially the best decisions for our kids as they get older. Yeah.
That's a great point. Is so divorce, some of the issues we deal with are universal, but yes, but each state, each country is going to have their own way of handling things. So definitely work with somebody in your geography who understands that and considers the planning aspects for a child with special needs.
Yeah. Marianne, let's talk just really briefly because we're almost out of time, but I think this is such an important point. And every child is different, and every family is different, and every circumstance is different. What are some of the things that you see, since you are really specialized, or you have a lot of experience with kids on that autism spectrum? What do you think are some things that parents maybe need to think about to help the children manage the transitions or even understand the divorce process? And that's such a huge question. So I know what you talk to a 3-year-old is going to be different than what you talk to an older teenage child, but are there some general guidelines or some general takeaways that might help parents who are struggling with what do I say and how do I say it?
Yeah, for sure. Because I know it was a big struggle for me to try to find resources and people to help to explain to my children. And they're, like I said, different abilities. And one of them, even though I tried to find psychologists and mental health professionals to help with that process, they're like, no, he really can't participate in those kind of sessions because of his cognitive and language abilities. And so I had to take it upon myself to figure out how to help them with their transition. And what I created for my family is something called a social story that some people may be familiar with who have children with different abilities or behavior therapists and so on, is we try to explain things in a very simple to understand at their level in a positive fashion so they can understand what's happening to then reduce their anxiety about the unknowns for the future. So for me, my kids are older, so some people use what they call PECS symbols and little simple pictures and maybe simple words or sometimes no words, right? But in my case, I did it as a storybook and I put photos of my family, myself, my kids, dad, in different contexts to have a very positive spin on it to say, okay, and I called it What's Happening to My Family. So they can then relate to that because I did it right before it was time for them to go to their other parents' new residence. And so that's a scary step in itself. And so I was able to get pictures of what the room would look like, where they were going, kind of what they could expect, talking about how they would be at the same school and that we're always there to support them. That even though mom and dad live in separate homes, we're still your parents and we both love you. And so that kind of helped ease some of the anxiety and questions they had. But I would say, and I would have, and the teachers shared it with them as well, especially for the one who was in a class where that was appropriate to do so, of course, on a private level. But what I would say is we don't have to explain everything about the divorce to our kids. We want to try, if we can, share the news together in a very neutral tone about what's happening. We don't want to take blame or give blame and this is not the session for that. This is just to have answers ready, kind of think about what they would ask. Some of the things I talked about in my story. So we want to talk about what the schedule might look like, and that may change over time, and maybe we want to do that gradually. And that's another point I would give, is we don't want to all of a sudden have a huge change. We want to maybe build up to that. But eventually, you're going to maybe have a set schedule. So maybe create a visual schedule as to this is when you're with mom, this is when you're with dad, so they can know what to expect and reduce anxiety. I know that's one of my son's big things is what are we doing each day, and wants to plan out every minute of the day. That's very important to him. And so, the more consistent a schedule you can have eventually, the better off people will be to know, okay, this is kind of what's expected of me. This is where I'll be, and this is, what I can do.
Yeah, I love that. And it's as somebody who worked in this field in the school system, it's really not, that's good advice for any parent with any child. And it's just really taking the time to make sure the kids are super comfortable. I love that idea of taking pictures so you can already talk about their room at mom's house and their room at dad's house, and really keep things really positive. I think that's so powerful. And I love that. As a matter of fact, when I do mediations quite often, and one of the things we talk about with a lot of different groups of kids is that step up co-parenting. So, you start with maybe an hour this weekend, and then maybe next weekend it's 2 hours. You don't take a child, as even a young child or a child that has maybe difficulty in transitioning between different environments. You don't want to take them all of a sudden and they're doing like a 48-hour, stay over with the other parent. That's too anxiety provoking for many children. Not, it doesn't have to be specifically kids that have autism, but any child can get traumatized by that, or a lot of anxiety. So I love that. I love that message. Thank you, Marianne. And thank you so much for sharing your time and having this wonderful discussion. I hope the listeners are able to take away some things. I know they will be, because I know I learned some things on this as well. So Marianne, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your time here today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And I'm happy to help parents as they're going through this, either one parent or even both together, taking a more neutral role, kind of consider the different aspects for the child.
Can you give your contact website or whatever's best? I'll make sure it's in the show notes, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing it with us now as well.
Sure. Yeah, the easiest way to reach me is through my website, which is www.specialfamilytransitions.com. And over there, you'll find a link to send me a note, and it's got links to my different social media, which are also all called Special Family Transitions. So I share lots of information, from podcasts I do to just things that can help you as you're going through before, during, or after divorce.
Yes, I follow Marianne on Facebook and LinkedIn, and she's always got tons of really good information and wonderful resources like different fairs and events and summits and things for parents to attend. And most of them are at no cost. So make sure you reach out and follow Marianne, and definitely grab a copy of the book, The Other Side of Divorce, Breakups That Lead to Breakthroughs, and take a read through every chapter, but make a special point of reading Marianne's chapter. Thank you so much for listening in today. And thank you, Marianne. And don't forget to check out all the other interviews for The Other Side of Divorce.